Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, and welcome to the Bailey channel, where we teach everyday DMs how to create truly amazing experiences for their players by combining art and technology. We also make modular systems and scenes that you can use without any setup. And our latest release for Foundry Virtual Tabletop is going to be the backdrop for this video where we showcase Module Management Plus by Mouse. Module Management Plus is a really fantastic kind of quality of life module for doing all things involving managing modules. With Module Management Plus, you can easily interact with a lot of important information directly on your Manage Module screen. And also within your configure settings, you can sync settings across all of your players, lock things down, etc. to really refine the experience. And perhaps the landmark feature of Module Management Plus is the ability to have module management presets that allow you to have lists of modules that you can switch between quickly and easily, along with the vast majority of their settings. You can then prepare system agnostic lists or 3D, non-3D, automated, not automated, prep and play, etc. It's a really great tool to have. Now, before we dive in, I do want to add a little disclaimer that this module hasn't been updated in a while, and so there are a few lingering issues in V12 that we address towards the end of the video. But all the footage you're about to see is in V12, and the developer Mouse has been active updating their other modules, so we feel confident that Module Management Plus will get a V12 update in the future. So with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and dive right in. To get started, we're going to take a look at some of the basic features that Module Management Plus gives us, and then we'll dive into some of the more advanced things. So if you go to your Manage Modules, normally this is the screen that you see. You can filter between all modules, active and inactive modules, and you can also use this to expand some descriptions. And then you have highlighted versions, and they're color-coded based upon whether they're verified for the version of Foundry that you're working on or not. And then some little buttons over here that you can hover over to see information about, say, the website or the GitHub repository, authors, etc. When we turn on Module Management Plus, though, we're going to have a very different experience here. The first thing you'll notice when you reload having activated Module Management Plus is this Changelogs dialog. This is going to go through and it's going to crawl the changelogs for all of the modules that you have installed that specify a changelog, of course, and it's going to display any that have changed since you last launched Foundry. Now, you can choose to disable this in the settings, or you can leave it up so you can peruse the changelogs. If you have a lot of modules, I honestly would probably turn it off just because it can get a little overwhelming when everything gets updated, but this is a really nice feature that you can go through and see the changelogs whenever you fire up Foundry after you've updated everything. You can also mark things as seen and just mark all of them as though you have read them. So you can just real quick remove that, and then the next time you reload, you won't have that. Then if we go into our module management here, we're going to have a very different experience. First off, I have this set up so it's going to cover the entire height of my screen. And then we have a whole lot more buttons here. Up at the top, we have changed from having different tabs here to a drop-down menu that we cycle between active, locked, inactive, etc. So we'll leave it on active here. We also have an export and import modules button, but we'll go over those later. And then we still have the expansion here to expand everything. You can also individually expand each module to read more about it. Within these, you have several new buttons. So we have the settings button, which is going to immediately open up your configure game settings to that specific module so you can see exactly what you want to alter. This is really helpful for if you're not 100% sure what a module does. Generally speaking, taking a look at the configure game settings is a good way to get an idea of, now why do I have that module installed again? So it's very helpful for that. Or if you know that you need to adjust something with a particular module, but you're not 100% sure which setting and you don't want to be scrolling through your configure settings menu, this is a quick way to get there. There's also now a link to view the website, which will actually open up the website specified in the particular module JSON. It's going to give you an indicator if it's using a socket API. Then if someone has opted into putting in the bugs section for their module, then you can click on this report and view bugs to go to the GitHub, etc., in order to report bugs and issues that you might have directly from your module settings. And if they have a changelog, you can click on changelog to actually open up the changelog that they have provided. Here we go. And so you can see the different versions here for the item macro module that I have installed, all specified in their changelog. We've also got that same README button for the info. And again, if this is specified in the module JSON in a proper format, then you can do this. Most of your free modules are going to have this kind of capability, but some of the premium ones might not because they might not be stored on a public GitHub repository, etc. Then if you want to look at the authors, you can click and it will pop up all of the author information when you click on it. And then finally, we're going to have the compatibility section moved over here as a separate button. Basically, over here, the version numbers are always going to be the exact same color, and instead there will be an additional icon indicating if there is a compatibility risk. So this is how the module management section has been really revamped here. We've also got down at the bottom a deactivate all modules or all non-locked modules. Obviously, Module Management Plus is going to be the locked module here. So that's kind of the gist of each particular entry. A few other things you'll notice is that things are now grouped by their dependencies. So for example, we've got BaileyWiki mass edit over here, and that has some dependencies for nuts and bolts, landing pages, and BaileyWiki 3D. All of those rely on that piece. And if we scroll down to the BaileyWiki maps towns, you can see the dungeon and modular city modules all are nested underneath maps towns. There's also kind of a prefix here where it says maps. And so it's intelligently renamed this to kind of group things. You can't manually reorder things in the module management browser. So the way Module Management Plus gets around that is by kind of changing the name for these modules as they appear in the module management menu. If you want to change these, you can right-click on any of these and rename them. So you can remove the maps part and you can instead make this BaileyWiki to make everything show up together, or you can just delete the part before the maps. And then if we scroll up, our BaileyWiki pieces are going to be up here at the top. When it comes to the linking, you're not going to be able to change the nesting behavior. So just keep that in mind. If you don't like how these are nested, that's something to keep in mind. You can, however, go into the Module Management Plus settings and adjust that. You'll also notice that there are some other intelligent modifications here. For example, we've got the library prefix basically in front of anything that is specified as a library type module. So tagger, socketlib, libwrapper, etc. All of them are going to have the library prefix. So they're all going to be grouped up together. And then again, we're grouping things based on what they are dependent upon. So it's got all of Molinet's submodules nested underneath Molinet core because Molinet core is required for all of the submodules. So it can take a little bit of getting used to if you have not been using Module Management Plus much, but it is a really nice way to be able to navigate things. You can see what's interconnected here. For example, I can find MIDI QL nested under DAE because just about everything for MIDI and the MIDI verse at large requires DAE to work, etc. So you can find things grouped up nicely and in a logical kind of sense here. And finally, we have at the bottom the deactivate all unlocked modules. By default, the only locked module is going to be Module Management Plus, but just like you can right-click to rename a module, you can also lock it, and that kind of sets you as a control module, if you will. And then you can deactivate and reactivate anything that's not locked in that manner. Manage Modules isn't the only window that's changed, though. If we go into Configure Settings, you'll notice that there are some new icons here. I'm going to go ahead and go into Argon as a good example of a lot of different types of settings here. So you'll notice theme customization does not have any icon here, but this theme mode does, and it's a globe icon indicating a world setting. World settings or global settings are settings that only you, the GM, or an assistant GM can alter, and it's going to affect everyone. Typically, these are big functional settings that are going to change how things work with a module, period, and something that wouldn't make sense on a client-to-client basis. So here we can change the theme mode between client and world, and that's going to affect this theme customization here. As we scroll down, we'll notice that there are these other icons that look like a person, and they're labeled as client settings. These are things that are going to vary from client to client, or user to user here. For these, you have 3 total buttons here. Again, that client icon that's indicating that it is in fact a client setting. So this auto scale here that I have for Argon is going to affect me and only me by default. Now, a really cool feature of Module Management Plus though is this sync setting option here. So if I left click on sync setting, I can send this setting to all other users. I do have to be using socketlib in order for this function to actually work, but as long as I have that requirement installed, then when I hit yes, it's going to force sync every other player's setting to this particular value. This is exceptionally useful if you are using certain things like displaying certain kinds of information, etc., and you want all of your players to start on the same page. So you can set this up ahead of time, sync it across to everyone, and then they're going to start the same base point. If you have synced something and you don't want players to be able to mess with it, then you can click on this lock option, and it's going to lock the setting. And then the sync section is going to disappear. This means that then your players are no longer going to be able to edit that particular setting. It is locked in. They cannot change it in any way, shape, or form. The situations where you might want to use this are kind of narrow, but again, maybe something where you want to only have certain kinds of information displayed based upon the other modules here, etc., or you want to essentially remove the ability for them to use certain modules like, say, a specific kind of token HUD that you want to only use as the GM. You want to force it to be locked for them and off, something like that. So you can lock and unlock those settings. Now, an important note on the sync setting here. This is going to sync the saved setting. Whenever I am doing any of these actions, for example, this open on combat start, if I don't save my changes and I go back to my configure settings for Argon, this open on combat start is not ticked. So this is not saved right here. So same thing with this auto scale. If I don't save it and I go to sync it, so if I try to sync this with my players and then I save my changes, if I were to open up a player settings, then it is not going to be saved as off. I have to first go in, make my change as I have done now, and then sync my setting, and it's going to actually carry across. Now that we've gone over the quality of life features that Module Management Plus adds, let's discuss what is probably the marquee feature of the module, and that is going to be presets. Next to the filter modules search bar up at the top, there is a small button called Manage Presets. When we click on this, we get a little dialog and we can select Create New Preset. And we're just going to call this Baseline as an example here. And this is going to be my baseline list of modules that I always have on. If I click on Info, then I can see all of the active modules here. We can also update, which is going to then just take all of the modules I have and then push those settings. I can delete it and I can also activate it. So if we go ahead and turn some things off, like let's turn off all of the 3D options here. And then we can save these module settings and reload. We can then go to our active modules and we can see that those are still off. If we go into our presets, we can make a new preset and we can do, say, baseline minus 3D. And then if we go ahead and select activate on baseline and select yes, since we're changing modules, it's going to ask us to reload. And we'll see now that all of the 3D modules are included. That's not everything though. So let's say we change some settings when it comes to our baseline. So if I go into 3D Canvas and I want to change the graphic settings, this is just the default, very low. My machine can handle very high, so I'm going to go ahead and change it to that, which is going to require a reload. Upon reloading, I'm going to get this data sync pop-up. That's going to tell me that there's a difference in client settings detected. And this is going to tell me the module that this is coming from, the settings that are affected, and then what I have versus what's stored in the saved settings. From here, you've got three options. You can say yes, and it's going to sync this browser settings to become what these saved settings are. So this would take it from that very high back down to the very low that we have saved. We have ignore, in which case nothing's going to happen. And then we have no, which is going to change the saved settings that are stored in the preset to the ones from the browser. So yes is from right over to the left, and no is from the left over to the right. I'm going to go ahead and select no. And there is a slight quirk to this. It's going to send those settings over, but it's not going to save them. So if you're making these changes, you want to go into your configure settings, and all you have to do is hit save changes. And now if I refresh, I won't have that pop up anymore. And if we go into our configure settings again, and we go down to 3D canvas, we'll see that we're on that very high. So this is now the appropriate setting for the 3D section. And so you can use this process to save and store just about any setting in Foundry. However, there is one major group of exceptions to this, and that's going to be settings that are stored within a dialog. As of the time of this recording in V12, this is one of the few pieces that is not working properly with Module Management Plus, and that's going to be anything inside of these dialog boxes for storing settings. Basically, if it exists inside of one of these dialog boxes, it's not going to be stored within the preset and checked against. And this is particularly unfortunate when it comes to MIDI QOL and similar things, where if you adjust your workflow settings, it's not going to check that against the preset, and you can't actually properly store the information in the preset. This is unfortunate because it does appear to be working completely correctly in Foundry V11. So if you're still on Foundry V11 and you're moving things back and forth between different automation setups, you can still access that. Just in V12, we still need that feature updated in order to work properly. Similarly, if we go into our manage modules, there is an import and an export option here, and these are going to look a little strange in V12, where it's going to tell you just no names for the modules, and it's going to give you zeros for the versions. And if you go to import, you're going to have a similarly strange experience where it's empty, but you can still sync settings, etc., and everything except for those settings that are inside of dialog boxes will come through okay in V12. Again, this all seems to be working more or less properly in Foundry V11, but this is the few areas where we have some issues due to the module not being updated yet for V12. We still absolutely love this module for all of its other features, and so even if you don't end up leveraging the presets and the import-export, and you use a different module for that, this is still a really good one to have in your back pocket for syncing those settings and for all the great quality of life features we've got in our module management section. And that's going to conclude our showcase and tutorial on Module Management Plus by Mouse. We think this is an excellent piece to have in your DM's toolkit. The quality of life features are just fantastic. With the configure settings, you are able to really quickly and easily see what's global, what's client, sync those settings across for your players, lock certain things out so that you have a unified experience, and just generally hone and refine that experience for all of your players very easily through that settings window. And the module management screen has all kinds of great ways to visualize and interact with important information on those modules. Even though there are some issues with presets and importing and exporting in V12, we still find it an incredibly valuable tool to be able to switch between lists for, say, prep, play, 3D, non-3D, or system agnostic lists of modules and the vast majority of their settings to quickly and easily hop between the two. But let us know in the comments what you think. Are you excited and want to pick up this module immediately to be using in your games, or are you going to wait until Mouse has put out a V12 update? Speaking of, we know that Mouse has been hard at work updating their other modules and responding to issues on GitHub, etc. And so Mouse, if you are watching, then consider this a call to arms. We would absolutely love to see a V12 update for Module Management Plus whenever you get the chance. But either way, thank you so much for the fantastic module that you have given us already. This has been Zephyr with the Bailey Wiki channel, and if you enjoyed this video, then subscribe to keep up with all of our latest content, and consider becoming a patron. Not only do you support the channel, but you also gain access to all of the modular systems and scenes that we've made for FoundryVTT, including all of these great backdrops that you've seen on the video here today. Again, this has been Zephyr. Thank you so much for watching, happy gaming, and have a good one.